Okay, so at this point, we're going to stitch. See, it's very well lined up. I make sure that my needle is in the middle and the presser foot is on the edge. It's lined up to the edge, and I'm stitching exactly 3/8 of an inch. When the needle is in the middle, it really measures 3/8 of an inch. Okay, so we go down. I go slowly. When you're sewing around a curve, it's very challenging because chances are the stitching wants to go off track. So what you're going to do is, first and foremost, you lower the stitch speed. You want to go very slowly. And remember, I'm going to have to be taking my pins as I go, taking them out as I go. So I'm going to be turning the fabric so that the edge at any point is sitting on the edge of the presser foot. Otherwise, you wind up stitching a straight stitch. But this is a curved stitch. The machine still sews straight, but you will be the one turning the neckline as you go along. And you can facilitate that when you are sewing slowly. You can speed your way through this one. Okay. And when you finish, you can stitch backwards to secure. All right. So this is what we get. Now, we can just turn this to the wrong side easily. Okay, this will be showing because it's now a contrast, we're able to, let me just bring this down. Because of the contrast nature of this, we want to make sure we can't see this at all, which is the we can't see the muslin. So what we do is we snip. We give a lot of snips, especially to the curviest parts. And the curviest parts are around this area of the neckline. Okay. The gentle part doesn't really require too much. Also, you can trim down, because this is not like a bias binding where you need the length of the seam allowance. This is just facing, so you can trim it down. Some people trim it down really small, but it's okay. You just want to trim it down. Okay. Okay, and then we start the process of moving it to the wrong side. Okay, you turn it to the wrong side and you do what we call finger pressing. You press like that, it applies heat to the fabric. Okay, and you will wind up, in fact, you can iron press it, but I'm going to teach you a skill called understitch. Now, understitch allows you to forever keep this in the back without it showing. Now, you can look at it here and it looks good. You really don't see it showing up here. But with understitch, you ensure that nothing, this is actually called a lip, when you see the back facing trying to show up like this. When you've done this a few times, you see that struggle comes through. But I'm going to show you how you do understitch. Understitch is a very important skill to know. You open the two. This is how I explain it to make it a little fun. Okay, much like this facing wants to stay where it is, standing. This seam allowance is comfortable standing like that, or lying the way it was. And this dress is comfortable just being where it is. Now you're trying to bring the facing to go over the seam allowance and come to lie here. It's like this seam allowance is not happy with that. So what do? We stitch the seam allowance onto the facing, kind of forcing it to lay and work with us. Okay, so it's going to be sewn onto. We're going to force it to stay on the facing. And that whole process is called understitch. Okay, so we're going to do that. And here it is. Understitch. As you stitch it, you pull away, you pull them apart so that you can get to do your understitch. Now, the understitch is a stitch that is 1/8 of an inch away from the original line here. So you're stitching straight down, but you're being very careful so that you're stitching. This thing should not buckle. You're stitching right on the seam allowance onto the facing. And as you stitch, you pull apart so nothing buckles. You're stitching next to the original sewing line. Just a small space away from the original sewing line. And if you do it slowly, maybe my hands are in the way, but hopefully you can see. I'm going to show you. See, it's not the best because I'm maneuvering, but generally when you stitch, this is what you should be getting, more like very close to the original seam line. And what we've done is we forced the seam allowance to lie flat on the facing before we throw it to the back. And once you do the understitch, when you throw it to the back, nothing you do will bring this showing up again. It will, nothing you do, like nothing will bring it back to showing itself on the front again. It's so powerful. Okay, you completely hide it. And we do this with lining as well. If this was the lining that is covering the whole garment, you will see that understitch will be done in the back like that. Okay, so once you do understitch, it completely hides the facing and it stays. And let me see if I can. This is not too easy to see, but yeah, like this is a facing. This part, this little piece is a facing. This is understitch. You can see there's a second line. It's very hard to see, but there's a second line which seeks to attach this seam allowance onto the facing. This is the facing. This is the facing. So it is sewn. The seam allowance is sewn onto the facing. Where is it? Here. It is sewn. There's a sewing itself of the facing and the garment, but then the seam allowance separately is sewn onto the facing after the attachment of the facing and the garment. And that forces the facing to stay. But you will see the line. You will see the path of the understitch. That is called understitch. And it's all through any garment. You can take any garment you have and check it out to understand how the understitch works. Okay. All right.